Hey everyone, and welcome back to another Nintendo Switch indie game review with Saga of the Moon Priestess. Now this game is an action-adventure game, and it released for a budget price of only $5.99 on January 24th of 2024. The game is published by eSHOP, being developed by Pixel Trash, and it has an overall download size of only 73 megabytes. Now if you're in the market for a bite-sized Zelda-like adventure, today's video is definitely one you're going to want to watch. Now, as we jump into today's review, just remember one of the best ways to support the channel is to hit that like button and subscribe if you aren't already. Now, storyline-wise, everything is pretty much delivered in one short cutscene in the beginning, where you see your kingdom's prince being abducted by an unknown villain. You then get a short wall of text that explains that as a representative of the Moon Priestess, it is your job now to set out on an adventure and try to get the prince back. Now this is a very minimalistic approach to the storyline, and to be honest, if you chat with some of the in-game characters, you will get small tidbits of extra information, but the storyline really never develops any more than that. You will get one short cutscene at the end, however, once again, it is very minimalistic in its delivery. So this is basically a game betting everything on its gameplay. And it does feel like a slight missed opportunity, because a little bit of injected lore could have gone a long way. Now gameplay-wise, as I said in the introduction, this is very much a Zelda-like adventure, which is very closely emulating something you would have expected from, let's say, Link's Awakening DX. However, the movement system, not being grid-based, does also show a touch of A Link to the Past. However, that does bring up another issue, which we will get to a little bit later. I also want to preface this by saying that this is truly a bite-sized adventure, with only 5 dungeons to explore, and for an experienced Zelda fan, will most likely take about 3 hours to finish, with some optional quests that might add in about an extra hour. That doesn't mean that the game wasn't satisfactory, however, because given its simplistic take on the gameplay, had it extended too far, it might have become redundant. And given its budget price point, it actually feels pretty fitting, as a game that can be knocked out in one extended evening or weekend gaming session, giving you a nice dose of nostalgia without overstaying its welcome. The overall map is pretty small, although it really does a good job of setting up a separate biome, each one hiding a dungeon. Now the progression throughout these dungeons is pretty linear, where you pretty much need the collectible item in each one to access the next. And just in case you ever get lost, you can actually visit the town fortune teller, which will give you a hint in which direction you should be going next. Now the rest of the town is a very simple and functional affair, with the main attraction being the vendor, who can offer you health refills, arrows, or bombs. This is really where I think the game could have really injected a little bit of extra lore, because there are little tidbits here and there, but it feels like a missed opportunity. Now if we get to the dungeons themselves, they actually feel pretty well constructed. The puzzles will generally challenge you for a few moments without going too overboard, and at the same time give you a nice sense of satisfaction when you do finally find a solution. The only issue here is that there's no real true moment of originality where we haven't already seen these puzzles in other games. And as I pointed to earlier, most likely any experienced Zelda fan won't find a huge amount of challenge. So now if we get to the controls. Now this was maybe my biggest point of contention with the whole game. And I would say that the main issue here is that your character's movement feels very sluggish. It really just feels like your character is moving too slowly, especially compared to the movement speed of some of the enemies. What that transcribes to is many of the hits you'll take throughout the game do feel avoidable, however it just feels like your character isn't moving fast enough. If we compare this to a traditional Zelda game, Link always feels when you control him sort of light on his feet, while the character in this game feels like she weighs a ton. Now don't get me wrong, it's far from unplayable, it just feels like an odd choice. Also adding to this challenge, your weapon only strikes enemies directly in front of you, which actually resembles very closely the original NES Zelda. However, this is a really odd mix with the fact that it's not a grid-based movement system, but rather a free moving one. And pretty much every Zelda title that offers a free movement system also has your sword moving in an arc, allowing you to hit enemies at a 45-degree angle. This does lead to a lot of odd positioning situations, and ultimately leads to slightly reducing the satisfaction of the combat. And my last sort of gripe on the control side is the fact that you can only have one selectable item at a time. This does lead to a lot of excessive menuing, and sort of wastes the fact that you have a lot of unused buttons on your controller. It also sets up a couple of odd scenarios where you actually have to combine the use of two of your items. And when you actually enter the pause menu to select the other item, the game itself doesn't pause, meaning that your success actually depends on your ability to menu quickly. It just once again feels like a very odd choice. But overall, don't get me wrong, this still offers a satisfying action-adventure experience. These are just little tidbits that could have been improved to deliver an even more satisfactory one. And overall, however, I still did end up enjoying my playthrough. Now graphically, the game delivered a very pleasing experience, as I said earlier, feeling very heavily influenced by Link's Awakening DX. The use of colors and designs really sells the fact that you jump from one biome to another. The enemy designs for the most part do feel very different one from another, and there's a decent variety. Where I was maybe slightly disappointed from a design perspective is some of the bosses felt underwhelming. And while in a general Zelda game, the boss is generally the highlight of each and every dungeon, some of these felt very forgettable. But overall, if you're a fan of the 8-bit or Game Boy aesthetics, you'll most likely be very pleased here. Now sound-wise, once again, this game is delivering a pretty solid package, especially being at a very budget price point. Each dungeon has its individual chiptune music soundtrack, and the overworld has another separate one. The loops are long enough where they never really become annoying, and also given the short playtime of the game, everything fits together very nicely. So at least on the visual and sound side, this is delivering a very nice nostalgic package. So now it's time for the verdict, and if this is the first ever review of mine that you're watching, you can check out my full review scale in the description of the video. And in the case of Saga of the Moon Priestess, I'm giving this game a 6.5, putting it at the high end of a decent game. Overall, as I've been saying since the beginning of this review, if you're in the market for a bite-sized Zelda-like adventure that you can knock out in pretty much one sitting, this is actually going to be offering a very enticing package. And overall, although all the elements do come together pretty nicely, there were just missed opportunities on the control side of the game and also the storyline. However, at this very budget price point, if you're into this style of gameplay, this can nonetheless be a very decent pickup. So now I want to hear from all of you. Let me know in the comments down below what you think of Saga of the Moon Priestess. And don't forget on the way out to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel if you aren't already, and just as usual, I hope I'll see you in my next video.